Thank you, Dr. Uche. First of all, just as a way of introduction and easing up, I want to say that I knew Uche before I came here. You know, we were in contact when in Nairobi, having been in Kenya also as a journalist. And I was pleased to find him here, and particularly in the college where I came, so I felt at home in the first instance. Now, these listening to local language radio in rural Kenya is an ongoing research, I want to say. This is my doctoral work, which I'm doing. And I'm looking at it from a different perspective, not necessarily vernacular languages. I'm adding on one more element, which is Kenya's national language and also Kenya's official language, which is Kiswahili. That is why it is not vernacular languages. It is actually local languages. So it is actually the vernacular languages, although I've always said I don't like using vernacular because to me vernacular has its own offensive connotations. So even in that level, I don't like using vernacular. But here, vernacular, local refers to those languages, local languages, plus Kenya's official language, which is also the national language, which is Kiswahili. On this, I want to take you through just a background, some background information for those who may not know, some overview information about broadcasting in Kenya. Now, the population of Kenya, we are talking about 38 million, slightly over 38.5 million people. This is according to population census done last year and released just in August this year, where we have male at 19, just well over 19 million, and female just well over 19 again. And this gives us some gender ratio of around 1:1. And that in itself has brought complications in Kenya, women arguing about that ratio, because women in Kenya are saying, if indeed the ratio is 1:1, how come we do not have men to marry us? You know. And this has actually dominated the talk on local language radio. It's part of what I'm investigating, because people, the women are complaining they don't have enough men to marry them. But the ratio given official is 1:1. That also dominates in Uganda, because the ratio officially in Uganda is 1:3. For every one man, we have 3. So you see, that is the difference. In Tanzania, of course, the ratio is 1:2. But in Kenya, it is 1:1. So that is just some statistics there. In the country also, we have population by community in terms of the tribes. The largest one are the Kikuyu, who are 6.6 million. The Luya at 5.3, the Kalenjin at 4.9, the Luo at 4, the Kamba at almost 4 again. These 5 communities make actually 72% of the entire population. Now in Kenya, we have around 42 communities or tribes, if you like. So, but you can see 5 of those communities are already taking 72% of the population, which means the rest is just 36 and thereabout. So my investigation is based on the Kikuyu, who are the largest, and the Kalenjin, that is the third. So basically talking about around 11 million, you know, in terms of population out of the 38 million. Now, in terms of ownership, and here I'm talking about how many people in the country own radio, television, and mobile phones. According to the population census, 74% of Kenyans own some form of radio. Television is by 28. I think it was 28%, that is 28.05, so 28%. And mobile phones, 63, coming up again. That will be of interest to people like Uche and Karan, who want to investigate political communication and how new media is influencing political development in that country. Now, in terms of when we categorize those stations in terms of the language of broadcasting, we have 50 radio stations which do broadcast in English. Then we have 30 broadcasting in vernacular. We have a further 27% broadcasting in Kiswahili. Now, you can see what I'm doing. I'm looking at the ones doing vernacular, 30, and Kiswahili. So that adds up to 57 out of 107. The data here, especially in terms of the number of stations, might have changed, because what is happening now in Kenya is that because of freedom of expression and the media, especially with the new constitution, just promulgated in August this year, people have a lot of democratic space, and new broadcasting stations, especially in radio, FM radio, are coming up every other day. So we could be having slightly more than what I've indicated there. But this was the data as of late last year. And this, out of all these, 46% are as a result of media liberalization, which started in the year 2002, with the end of the Moi era and media being more vibrant and liberalized. Now, in terms of listening, we have Kiswahili stations, and this is the latest in terms of listening. Stations taking 48% of listeners in Kenya. English stations are at 38%, and the vernacular stations are doing 14%. Which means, when I talk about local language stations, that addition there gives me 62%, and the English is at 38%. Now, the method of our investigation will basically be on ethnography, media ethnography, where first we used questionnaires, then interviews, semi-structured preliminary interviews, which were around 108. Then we had conversational interviews, just to probe further, one-to-one, to verify some facts, then in-depth interviews with broadcasters and listeners at various sites, observation. Media ethnography, or ethnography in general, also encourage observation as part of social interaction. Then we have focus group discussion. Of course, all this was based on issues like gender, the age of the participants, marital status stratification. Now, my rationale for this research was the fact that in Kenya, commercial audience research has not taken center stage, and especially on rural audiences. Number two, the result of the ethnic crisis, which was there in 2008, after the 2007 general elections in Kenya, where the role of local language radio was put to question, made me also, or made this research very necessary to critique and establish whether actually this local language media and radio, for that matter, had any role to play. Now, I just had some quote from two of the competing radio stations during the time of crisis in Kenya. One was from Kass FM, which is the major radio broadcasting station broadcasting to the area I'm investigating. And this is in Rift Valley. And Kass FM broadcasts in Kalenjin. And Kass FM, one of the quotes from Kass FM during that time of crisis was, there was a cliche like Omu, where Omu meant ondoa madoadoa yote. That is now in Swahili. But what it means is remove all the stains. Where the stains here meant foreigners in that land. Settlement patterns in Kenya, you need to understand that. Settlement patterns in Kenya are in such a way that particular communities stay in particular areas. So there is that homogeneity in terms of communities staying in certain areas. People who are not original inhabitants of those areas are seen to be foreigners in that aspect. And therefore, there were people in that region who were seen as outsiders and were supporting a different cause from those who are considered original inhabitants of the land. And in Rift Valley, we generally have farmers. Most of the people are farmers there. So Kass FM was saying we are farmers and we are living in the midst of weeds. So the weeds are outsiders, the foreigners for that matter, that we need to be cleansed, that needs to be cleansed or pulled out. So they were advocating for war and removal, killing of those considered to be outsiders. Now, in Oro FM, which is the other station I'm investigating, which broadcasts to Central amongst the Kikuyu. And remember, I had indicated earlier that the Kikuyu are the most populous. But they have also settled in Rift Valley, where the Kalenjin's original area. So they were calling for beasts. They were calling people from the other side beasts from the west. The Rift Valley is to the west of Kenya. The Kikuyus settled from around Nairobi to central Kenya. So they were calling them, or those people from the other side, beasts from the west, baboons, animals of the west. I just picked something. Of course, there was a lot of very bad words used and, calling on people to arm themselves to remove those people physically and all that. But I just picked this to show you how things were happening. Now, that was just a brief, background information. But what is really, when you go to the villages in rural Kenya, what role does radio play? What is the role of radio? I discovered that radio is a companion to listeners. To most people, without radio, many things do not happen. It makes them happy. It makes them work even faster, according to some of the people who were interviewed. Now, it has transformed the social cultural aspects of life by challenging taboos. Now, in both the sites, I found out that, and I know that as a Kenyan, that there are certain topics, certain issues in Africa generally, which you don't talk about openly. Issues, for example, like issues of sex. In Africa, we don't talk about sex openly, like I am talking to you here, and I start talking about sex, we abhor such. Those are private topics. But what radio has done is that it has changed that. It has brought the discussion of taboo issues into focus. The people will not talk about them openly, but they are now listening to broadcasters, to people giving views about such topics, to discussions about issues to do with sexuality, issues to do with rape, issues to do with very complex matters which would otherwise not be discussed at face-to-face discussions, whether at family or public meetings. Also, I discovered that radio plays a very important role of responding to urgent calls and giving people assistance. Now, when I was in the field, and I'm still going to the field to a certain matters, I discovered that when issues came up, urgent issues, with the help of a mobile phone, the local people in the rural places would call the radio station and report a certain matter. That way, the radio station will be talking about it in their news beats, which are done very periodically, or to call the authorities concerned, for example, the police, the health authorities, and all that, to such matters as urgent as they are. They also use radio as a source of information and education. I've already talked about that, information of agricultural nature, on education issues like the HIV, the role of why, for example, it is important to take the girl child to school, considering the African cultural heritage and rights and all that. And I discovered that newspaper readership, because I was also comparing other forms or other ways which they get information. And I picked on three locations, three different locations, to compare how they were reading newspapers. And I discovered that, for example, in Muiga town, this is in Central Province, in Nyeri, where the president comes from, 12 people had read, a week before that, had read a newspaper. And out of 29, so 17 had not read. 11 people in Ndarasha. Muiga is a comparatively bigger town. Ndarasha is a bit smaller, and Muyogo is really rural. So 11 people had read, 25 people had not read, 11 people had read at Muyogo, and 31 had not read. Now, this was I could attribute this to several reasons. One, in urban centers, it is easy to, first of all, access newspapers because they come from Nairobi. They are printed in Nairobi, so it is easy. But even then, you can see that 17 of them, for example, in an urban center like Muiga, had not read. But also, economic conditions are important to consider here. Poverty. People in Kenya live generally at around $2 a day, work of 8 hours. So even when they're available, I discovered that they actually did not read their own newspapers, which they bought. They either read them from a friend or in a hotel or restaurant. So there were those and all that. So poverty, education, poverty, and accessibility was a problem. They also used it to radio to get farming information or agriculture. And because it is in the rural areas, they identified certain programs which were done on radio to help farmers, farming techniques, pesticides, their use, rainfall patterns, planting seasons and all that. So I found out that the 2 radio stations I was looking at, which were broadcasting to those areas, had quite a chunk of information through certain programs which were geared towards this. Health information I've talked about. Then there's also, I discovered that there's an issue of personal relationship with radio. Radio had become a very personal, or has become a very personal tool to most rural Kenyans. And I found certain, for example, in Central Province, amongst the Kikuyu, there was the issue of, they were talking about karedio gakwa, which I loosely translated in Swahili to karedio kangu, you know, meaning that actually it is my small precious radio, you know. This is how precious the radio had become. So there was really a very personal relationship with radio. Later, I'll show you a quote from one person who communicated with me. And with that personalization, I found out that radio had created spaces from the larger domestic sphere. Women had radio spaces in the kitchen and the farms, for those who went to the farms. Or they would go to the farms, and once they are back home, they'll be in the kitchen cooking and preparing all those, so the radio will be there. So that is their space. The young men had their space in the cubicles. Cubicles here is a term loosely used in Kenya to mean the small house outside of the main house, where young men past 15 years and all that, stay, because they don't stay after some age. They don't stay in the main house. All right, so that is how it operates, and I believe elsewhere in Africa. Then the men, most of the men, especially from 35 and above, I found that their space for radio was mobile. They carried their radio wherever they were, especially those who were not working in offices. And some of course, of them were with it in their places of work, depending on what type of work which they did. So, but again, I also found out that there was multiple radio spaces, in the sense that in some families, you find that there will be a radio for the girls, one for the kitchen, one for the boys, and one for the father. Yeah, I found out that. So there was also a multiple space for different members of the family, because they have different choices of programs which they want to listen at different times or at the same time. So to avoid that conflict, I found out that some families had created multiple radio spaces. Radio as a social platform, exchanging views on different aspects, marriage, and other social issues, and civic engagement. There are various programs which are found very popular. An example of such a program is a program known as Bunge la Mwananchi. Bunge la Mwananchi can be translated in English to mean a people's parliament, you know, where the presenters taught the audiences about parliamentary issues and what was discussed in parliament, and critiquing what is happening in the country, within the government, and within the locality where the radio station focuses. So there was a lot of civic participation and engagement. I also found out that radio was also actively involved in solving problems, especially at the local level. There were several programs I found on both radio stations which were geared towards solving certain issues at the local level. So they had some programs called Radio Mashinani, you know, radio at the grassroots, which went around early in the morning and later in the evening to report on several issues and how they should be sorted. So this is a quote I picked from some lady who communicated to me in April this year. She said that, I just don't know what I'll do without a radio. When the radio doesn't have batteries, for the transistor batteries which are used, I feel like I can go crazy. You see, during the day, the village is so quiet, and again, I'm here all alone. The only noise that I can hear is probably an animal somewhere. Apart from that, it's all, I think she meant all hollow. With the radio, I have company because I'll be listening to what is going on, different programs or music. I don't even have to concentrate to listen. The sound of the radio makes the place habitable. That is what Joan Ngeno from Rift Valley told me. Thank you so much.